I'm Garrett Dempsey, and I'm going to start over because I don't know if we were live when I did the first welcome. So some of you get to hear it twice, maybe. Some of you first time through. But I just wanted to welcome everybody to our BIPOC Voices in Nature live stream conversation. This is our winter edition. My name is Garrett Dempsey. I'm a Sierra Club representative with Detroit Outdoors Collaborative. Detroit Outdoors is a partnership between the Sierra Club, Detroit Parks and Recreation, and the YMCA Metro Detroit. We work together to create meaningful connections in nature for youth and communities. And we came together a few years ago, particularly around a youth camping collaborative to help kids experience camping right in the city of Detroit. We've grown from there to really just try to embrace and support all ways of building community and connection in nature. And building community is what we're doing here today. And I'm really excited for the discussion we get to have with our talented and gifted guests, Phil Henderson, Erin Johnson, and Alice Jasper. Before we start, I would like to just say a couple of things before we get into our conversation. One thing is that nature is a place of healing for many of us, and our intention with this live stream was really to center and celebrate BIPOC connections and legacies to the outdoors. And for me personally, I'm relieved to be sharing space with these friends today because my heart is broken about the death of Tyree Nichols. My heart goes out to his family. My heart goes out to the city of Memphis. And while we highlight the incredible work of the folks on our panel today, we also do it knowing that we can never stop the work of building community and supporting one another. Phil and I are actually going to be with some folks that we know from Memphis Rocks next week up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Erin, Alice, and I all live in Michigan year-round. And as we start our conversation, I'd just like to offer a word of gratitude to the Anishinaabe. Their connections to this land run deep, and we're all better for it. And I'd like to offer a special word of gratitude to the Lake Superior bands of Ojibwe. Some of us are going to be climbing ice next week at Michigan Ice Fest, right on the shores of Lake Superior, Gitchagume. So to our Ojibwe friends, I'd just like to say miigwech. And with that, what I want to do is give Alice, Erin, and Phil a chance to introduce themselves. Maybe we'll just go in that alphabetical order. For me, I'm so excited that I get to be in this conversation with all three of them because I've been able to interact with them in different ways at different times in the outdoors. Both Phil, Alice, and I have been ice climbing up in the Upper Peninsula at different times together. I'm so bummed, Alice, that I didn't go fly fishing with you this last time around. But and then Erin and I have been able to really sort of engage and be with each other a lot in outdoor spaces around the city of Detroit. And I'm just amazed at the work that she's doing with the Family Forest School and the Black Land Coalition and so much. So I'm going to stop because I could keep on going on and on about all these amazing people. So if we could maybe just go around and say hello and introduce ourselves, and we'll go Alice, Erin, and Phil.
Hey everyone, my name is Alice Jasper, and thanks so much, Garrett, for inviting me to be here, and thanks to everybody who's watching. Appreciate you sitting in and kind of being part of this community with us today. So a brief bio on me. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Ended up going to college in the Upper Peninsula, actually, and put down roots in Grand Rapids, Michigan, about 10 years ago. And a lot of the work that I do as it pertains to outdoor recreation, I did a documentary in partnership with PBS a few years ago called Color Out Here, and have since been working to create platforms that elevate Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC narratives in outdoor spaces and in environmental stewardship. And then I also work to create community space and trips that are accessible for folks, regardless of how much experience they may or may not have in the outdoors, really working to kind of expand the definition of outdoorsy. It can be sitting in a park with a book, or it can be climbing up a wall of ice, backpacking, fly fishing. There's just so many ways to connect with nature. So yeah, that's a lot of what I that I do and how I got to connect with Garrett, and just really excited to be here.
I was going to say, I thought I saw somebody moving in the background. But I am Mama Erin Johnson. I am joining y'all from Detroit. And so I always, first of all, happy Black History Month, everybody. It was Black History Month, started yesterday. And I always, when we're talking about winter and we're talking about Black people, I always like to talk about my African ancestors, because I feel like they are so proud of people like you, Phil Henderson, and people like ourselves here in Detroit, like living in the snow and like doing the damn thing. So I always like to bring that up. But I came, really back to nature the way that I'm engaging with it now as a mother, right? As a homeschooling mother. And in that vein, have worked with the Black to the Land Coalition here in Detroit and Detroit Outdoors and a number of other really awesome partners to create the Urban Forest School. So there was I really wanted for my own daughter, who's 6, who will probably make a cameo at some point, who really, watching children engage with nature in an uncontrolled environment, right? When they're able to just open exploration, open play, can teach them so much, not just, again, like from the science academic perspective, but also really, from an innate knowledge and wisdom of our connection to the planet, right? And so children have that and that can be, fostered in them in a really beautiful way. I've watched it in my own child, and I've watched it with the wonderful group of parents that we've brought together here in the Detroit area, focusing specifically on our Detroit parks. This is the Urban Forest School is specifically for Black and brown children 12 and under and their families. And so we just go out on hikes. We just did a snow hike at Detroit Outdoors in Palmer Park this past weekend. I still have to post the pictures, but it was phenomenal. We had kids in snowshoes, and I mean, just snow forts, and so getting the opportunity to frame our children's relationship with nature from an ancestrally relevant perspective is just, it's become one of the most important things that I do, again, as a Black woman, as a mother, and as a homeschooler. So I'm honored to be here with y'all today. Thank you for the opportunity, Garrett, to speak about something that is so deeply important to me and transformative in my life. And I'm really looking forward to our dialogue today. Thanks.
Yeah. Yep. My name's Philip. I'm coming to y'all. Actually, I'm sitting here in Aspen, Colorado right now. I live in Cortez, Colorado, but I'm doing a little bit of traveling right now. But I'm honored as well to just be here and be a part of this conversation. What bit I can add to it. It's funny. It just happens. I get pigeonholed as a climber, and honestly, I just connect in any ways. I'm just as happy gardening as I am climbing a mountain, and anything between that. So all of those things you guys mentioned, fishing, biking, whatever. I just want to be outside, and I've always been like that. We talk about that connection that children have, and I've been fortunate to, my daughter has lived her whole life outdoors in a sense. She's been skiing since she was 1. So I truly believe, because I've felt it, in that's where you can really make that connection, that foundational connection. We all still have it. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's still within us. We just have to reconnect to it. So yes, children are very much more pliable and easier because they're grounded in it. As we get older, we get disconnected from it, and I think it becomes a lot in a number of ways, and that's a whole nother conversation. But we can, as you can see now, you see there's a lot of people, even in their adult lives, who are reconnecting in whatever way that looks like for them. And that's really what I'm about in terms of. I think that there's something with nature that fits everybody. You just have to figure out what it is. And that's what we're about, is helping you figure out what that is. So,
I'm going to start off this thought, putting you back in that pigeonhole, Phil, as a climber, just because, Phil didn't mention his introduction. He was the expedition leader for first Full Circle Everest, right? The first all Black summit team expedition team, excuse me, for Mount Everest. Amazing. And I'd love to hear some stories. But the reason I mention it is I feel like with the three of you here, like we've got from like connections to the tallest place on earth, to, you know, communities around the country, to, you know, Erin invoking ancestors in the work that you do, like the introduction of children, the next generation, to the outdoors and to nature. Like we've got like time and culture and community and ancestors and place, like all of the mix here with all the three of you. I guess a question I want to ask Alice, because I know there's something that all four of us share in terms of just geographic location and history. We all have an urban connection. Like we're all like in some parts of our identity, city folks at one time or another. Just curious, Alice, if you could talk a little bit about like sort of your journey from being a New York City kid to just like loving the outdoors in the way that you do.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna apologize in advance that the mail carrier is on this block and my dog has things to say about it. So I apologize if she starts to bark a little bit. Yeah, so I was really fortunate to learn and get exposed to nature at a young age. I lived really close to Prospect Park in Brooklyn, which for those of you who don't know is basically the kind of Central Park equivalent to Brooklyn. It was designed by the same architects actually. And I identify as multiracial. My father is Black, and he was the one that actually really took me out into the park. He taught me how to use a compass. There's pictures of me when I'm 5 with like a canteen full of apple juice and trying to learn how to use a compass. He took me camping, and you know, got to experience and build a relationship to nature. My mother is originally from Michigan, which is what prompted me to look into colleges up here. And I decided to go to the Upper Peninsula, which was just a minor culture shock coming from New York City. And I think in having kind of lived in my own New York City bubble, and also having the fact that my father, who is Black, be the one to really lead a lot of the education and exposure to nature for me, I didn't fully realize until getting to the UP that there really wasn't a lot of diversity and representation in outdoor spaces. And even somebody who's, you know, light complected as myself, I still felt a lot of barriers and exclusion into kind of the outdoorsy communities up there, which you really, you know, if you're going to live in the UP, you kind of got to get outside and enjoy nature. That's really kind of the point of being up there in a lot of ways. Otherwise, it's just dark a lot of the year and you don't really know what to do with yourself. So it did help me to definitely move outside of my comfort zone, and it really helped to fortify or solidify my love of nature. And I think it also pointed me in the direction of wanting to see more representation, wanting to have more community in spaces, in how we out enjoy the outdoors, and work to build my own authentic relationship to nature, not one that sort of follows in the steps of what has been predominantly a white space. Yeah, what does nature look like to me? What does outdoorsy mean to me? So that's, I think, that the juxtaposition of being born in Brooklyn and then going to the UP, I think helped me to really assess my love of nature, helped me to solidify that, and then to really work to try to build a community where I feel like me and the people I'm with can learn from and with each other, and grow our relationships with each other, while also learning how to grow our relationship to nature and ways to steward it, and heal within it. So.
First time I ever got to do something outdoors was ice climbing with Alice, and on that trip, she introduced me to the poet laureate of Grand Rapids. She brought up Kid, poet laureate, and I love the fact of like an example of like the type of community that you're, you know, looking to bring and the way you build it. It's not just like sort of who is your stereotypical sort of like outdoors person.
There's so many ways to enjoy nature, and you know, Kid is a great example of someone who as a Black woman, born and raised in Brooklyn in Grand Rapids, and very recently started to discover her love of nature and has been writing a lot about it, has done some amazing work around that. But that's just yet another way of connecting to nature. Again, it doesn't have to be ice climbing, and she went ice climbing and loved it. But there's just so many ways to experience it. And that was a magical trip. I lived in the UP for 6 years, never saw the Aurora Borealis, Northern Lights, until I was on that trip, which was the first time I was doing anything outdoorsy up there with other people of color. So it was just magic. And it was like the universe was just kind of blessing this whole expedition. So yeah, it's a really great time.
Oh, thank you for bringing back the memory of the Northern Lights. That was amazing. And to Philip, Erin, Alice, you know, I know I'm sort of like sending out some prompts, but at any point, please feel free to wrest control of this discussion for me. It would probably be better for it if I'm not like the sole conductor. But Erin, I would love it if you could talk a little bit about like, I'm thinking of the Family Forest School with Black to the Land and like the work that you're doing, really sort of cultivating building those connections to nature, but doing it like right inside Detroit, you know, and just sort of what that experience is like, and maybe what that experience has been like building that with your daughter.
And it's funny, I was actually going to jump in on the Northern Lights piece just because I think that's so cool that you saw it like in that context. And first time I saw the Northern Lights was with my mother, not in Detroit, but out a little farther north outside of Detroit where I grew up. And my mother was a science teacher, and she actually my father lived in Alaska before they moved back here. My dad was in the military, so they had seen it a number of times. And I just remember this night she went outside and she was like, "Oh, you got to come see this." And it was like the Northern Lights. And it was, I must have been like maybe 10 or something. But anyway, so, you know, just so nature for me really even, you know, was steeped again in my parents and this really, again, unique relationship that they had with nature, having been Black people in Alaska in the 1970s. And just all the things that they told me about those experiences and how much they, you know, had to be outside and how much they felt held and loved in being outside. And so even for me, you know, throughout my urban life, right? So in my other life, you know, I went to U of M for undergrad and became an activist there, and then went to law school, right? Wanting to effectuate, you know, changing the law, right? I went to Howard for law school. I lived in DC for a long time. So, you know, again, there's nature and there's so many beautiful pieces of nature there, but a lot of them are being infiltrated, right? Or like are being gentrified. And, you know, so they're under attack in a lot of those ways. And so that really, when I think about it, a lot of my relationship with nature during that time was like a protective thing, right? It was like, oh, like wanting to see these places because they might not be there for too much longer, or wanting to go to these places because they might not always be available to me in the same way. I talk to my daughter all the time. I'm like, I want to take you to the Amazon rainforest, right? Like, I don't want the Amazon rainforest to be destroyed in 20 years. You know what I mean? And then it's just this memory that we never saw. So of course, like, so I take all of that again, I guess that's the legal, like, advocate side. I'm like, my dad's a lawyer too. And I'm so much advocating and really focused too on making sure that we're taking care of nature, you know, again, outside of the kind of like commercialized, like, you know, common sustainability talk, right? Like, are we really taking care of the places that are around us, right? I'm sure Garrett, you're like, how is she going to get this back to Detroit? But anyway, but I mean, you know, and so, you know, being that Detroit has, and I do a lot of work on this end with Black farmers also. So being that Detroit has such a large amount of vacant land, there's a lot of vacant land that people want to repurpose into more green things, right? People are like, you know, there's no house here. There's been no house here for 20 years. Like, why can't it be a park? Why can't it be a garden, right? So again, kind of like the beauty of Black Detroiters and Black Detroit saying, like, this is kind of what we want to use our space for, and we should have the ability to do that. And so with the forest school, you know, it developed. I was going around to different forest schools in the area, you know, kind of, you know, Ann Arbor, some other places, but it was all white people. They were all white. And so I was just like, and again, this was during the pandemic also. And so again, for me as a homeschooler, it was really like, this is an opportunity for us to all really kind of change our education paradigm and start thinking about how powerful the outdoors is as a classroom, right? To me, like, there's no better classroom than nature, right? Like, there's something that's always happening. There's always something for us to notice, there's the cycles of nature are there and they're happening. And again, growing up, I've lived in Michigan since I was 6, right? So I too was born in New York. Alice, you're above me on the thing. So I too was actually born in New York, but moved to Michigan when I was 6, right? So, and I think as a Michigander, you kind of are always engaged with nature because you're like surrounded by snow at some point, or your friends are talking about going up north or whatever the situation is. And so I just always had this desire to want to continue that work. And so as I became a mother, and as I, steeped deeper into that and wanted her to have those experiences, I said, we gotta start local. We gotta start with the places that are around us. And for me, the forest school is also about placemaking, right? So making sure that, when these students are coming to Palmer Park, right, to Detroit Outdoors, and when we're going to Rouge Park has always kind of been our mainstay, right? So like we've done all the little trails in Rouge, and Baba Chris, who I see in the chat, so I want to shout out to him. He's our co-facilitator, and he, has led us through a variety of things there at Stonebridge. And so, understanding and helping the children and their families understand, like, the more that we come to these spaces, the more that we occupy these spaces, and the more that we take intentional care of these spaces become ours and we become theirs, right? And so I think that is, in essence, to me, the strongest way to build the climate justice warriors that we need in the next generation. I mean, like, if they understand and they come from a place of loving a space that also held them, I think that they are more equipped, to bring the kind of, again, critical thinking and love and compassion, but also, virulent advocacy, right? And passion, and hardcore work, to building, and to saving the world, right, from the place that we have it in now, and to building it into what we need for 7 more generations, right? In many African traditions, we talk about how 7 generations ago, somebody was thinking about me, you know what I mean? And so I have a responsibility to think about the people 7 generations in the future. And so I think that this being outside and helping our children and our families recreate that special relationship with nature that we've always had is one of the most powerful ways that we can do
that. Thank you, Erin.
Sorry, that's just us. My life's work. I love it so much. Thank you all for just letting me go on and on. Okay.
When you talk about that placemaking with Detroit Outdoors, one of the reasons we wanted to, be a part of a camping program in Detroit is because it's a powerful thing to connect with home, right? It's part of your identity. And, we knew it wasn't a matter of like, oh, we got to sell people on this idea. No, like, there was abundance. There was all of this connection. There was all these folks already doing it. It was really just about how do we sort of like find ways to connect, and it's been wonderful to be a part of that. And when Family Forest School rolls into an event at Rouge Park, it's like that just makes it even better. Like, the kids, the parents, like, man, now this is like happening in Rouge because Family Forest School is here. Little kids are showing us the way. Phil, I saw you come off mute.
So fun.
Oh no, I was just keeping it on mute just because. I was just preparing myself just in case you had a question for me.
Oh man, I got so many questions. Like, but what's on the top of your mind?
No, I mean, it's a lot of things, but I think I was looking at a couple of questions that we had talked about before, and looking from my perspective and like how things have changed, and as well as how technology plays a piece in that and so on. And I mean, honestly, if you think about it, this is what we're doing right here, in the fact that 30 years ago, you could not do this. You couldn't talk to, I don't know how many people are watching right now, but you couldn't reach that many people. You'd have to get them in the same room. So just that effect in itself is a change. So, but when I say that, I say it because a lot of the things that Erin just mentioned, when you talk about community gardens and open space and things, I think these things have been there for a long time. We are, as Black and brown people, are coming around to I would say, we just have a stronger voice, at this point, and more demanding in a sense, but it's because we have that drive to reconnect with nature that's always been there, right? So really what I see is that change is not only are the people changing and say we want this and we recognize the need for it because it is healing, or because it is more healthy for me, not only physically but mentally as well. All of these things are coming around as at the same time as technology is helping us be able to do it. In terms of, you talked about homeschooling, it's like we can reach more people, not just on traditional education, but in all ways, right? And that's what this platform is doing, is allowing us to share those. So things have changed a lot, not only from just the population that's connecting with nature and how they're showing up in it, and reclaiming it in a sense, because I do feel about that reclaiming. What is outdoors? How do we view the outdoor industry? Do we just see it as climbing or ice climbing or fishing? It is gardening, it is herbal medicine, it's meditation, and it's all of these things if you're doing it. So we just have to recognize that it's not I said this before, it's not the institution that changes things, it's the people that change things. So we're the ones that are making those changes and representing what the outdoors means to us as for generations.
Sometimes I don't know what's more amazing is how things change or how things stay the same. And when I say stay the same, I'm thinking of like the positive things the same, right?
Yeah.
Like there are some through lines that are really like these strong threads, anchors. I'm just curious, Phil, are there things like in your decades of work in this space, being an outdoors person and building community, are there some things that you can think of that have been just these, I don't want to say North Star, but like these like some things where you're like, man, that's like, I experienced this 30 years ago when I just started. It was beautiful, and like I'm still experiencing it, maybe even in a new way now.
To me, that's just getting outside, man. And honestly, I'm a bit different, but I'm not different, and that's what I'm trying to explain. What I try to explain to people is that no, however it connects with you, however you connect with it, is what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be anything other than that, right? And we don't. I mean, let's just put it, the pandemic is a part of our life. It came, it's here. We're going to talk about it. We need to continue to do that. It's a part of it. But what the pandemic did was it made a lot of people stop in their tracks and think about life. What is it that makes me happy? What do I want to do? Life is short. Well, I went through that when I was 21 years old. That's why I'm saying I'm a little different than most people, because most people don't go through life-changing experiences in their life period, let alone, at a very young age. Most of us, we get to the end of our lives and we say, oh, I'm on my deathbed and I wish I could have done this and I wish I had done that. It's like, you know what? I had a chance to change that opportunity. I never think. To this day, I can almost guarantee you there's no opportunity. I say, what if I would have done that? There's no what ifs for me. I did it so I could try it and experience it. And if I can just, that's what people are wanting. They want to do whatever it is in their mind and their heart. They want to do it, whether that's outside, inside, whatever. But we're talking about the outdoors. Yeah. So a lot of the outdoors, it's within us and people want to do it. Now we need to show them that, yes, you can be comfortable doing it, because there's some scars in there that aren't comfortable,
And I think just to add to that, I mean, something I often say is it's not people and nature, it's people are nature. And I think that takes some time to shift that mindset, right? Even though my father was the one who took me to the park and, took me camping a few times, my dad is still doing a lot for his age, but he's 90 years old. So as a black man, as a black man in this country, he's seen a lot, and he's internalized, and I internalize too. Especially if you're black, you go out in the woods, you might not come back, right? That transgenerational fear gets passed down, But because we are in nature, being separate from it is, you know, in some ways it can be traumatizing for folks. People are cut off from us, from what we are connected to. So I yeah, just trying to, I guess, really echo what both Erin and Phil are saying, that that sense of connection is there. We're drawn to it, but we're also told to be uncomfortable, or that we don't belong there, or that we're not safe. And I have really loved doing some of these group trips that I've been able to do over the past number of years, because it helps to bridge that gap. It helps to make me feel safe, helps to make me not feel like I am unintelligent because I didn't know how to set up my tent or something like that. Like, we're all kind of learning how to do some of these things together.
Mhm.
And figuring out what fits best for us, what feels good to us, and how we connect to nature. And also healing, I think, from a lot of the things that we grew up learning or internalizing on it, that have separated us or kept us apart from it, or tried to, I guess, in our past. So.
Right, yeah.
And go ahead, Phil.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna add, just in really in alignment with kind of, I know the work that you're doing, Alice. I mean, a part two of healing from some of the negative things, right, is new narratives, right? So because all of those things that we are traumatized by in terms of being in nature sometimes are real, right? But there are also, I think there are historical narratives that have been downplayed, right? So again, when we think about Harriet Tubman, like someone who everybody knows, but like she survived in the forest all the time for multiple, it was her thing. Like, that was her thing. That was something that she was able to develop hundreds of years ago. So, I mean, so the idea that, so reframing historical narratives that have been given to us in a certain packaged way, and then also kind of like the Black history that we're all making, right? So like, we're all making this new Black history that reminds you, and again, Black history, brown history, indigenous, indigenous reclamation, right? However we want to put it. But we are all, also kind of living new narratives, and like, we can do these things. We should probably do them in community because it's safer, right? But we can do these things, and we're still doing these things, and we also were. You just might not have already known that, right? So just want to put that out there.
If I could, I want to, Phil, you're about to say something. So like, if that was a thought that was about to come out, please don't let me stop.
Yeah, no, I was just going to go back to what Alice was saying, in that, I mean, think about this and how we're trained to see things in a certain way. Her father, a Black man, is the person that taught her about the outdoors, that introduced her to the outdoors and so on. And in society, for the most part, we don't see Black men doing in that position, right? Let alone in any authoritative or teaching position. You see, so we have to, if we change our mindset, and this is one of the things where I go back to how are things change. It's like, well, when I came into that, just think about what that was like. I am a Black man teaching people things in the outdoors, and there were no students that looked like me. I wasn't their father. You see what I'm saying? And so now we have this opportunity for people to see people as people. They can educate anyone. So yes, I believe that Erin just mentioned doing things in community. And as we move forward in the outdoors, how many of us Black and brown people are leaders of that community in those places, in the leadership positions, so that we put aside that myth that we don't do things, we don't know things, and we can't be leaders of things in the outdoors.
Of course, Garrett, that I want to say that, that's why like organizations like Blacks of the Land Coalition are so important. Like, I knew, I already knew, like, when I went to this, or I was going to these different forest schools again, and like, I didn't see any, good representation of myself, or representation that I wanted my daughter to see. And I immediately knew, I was like, Blacks of the Land Coalition is is the way they're going to see this vision. They have this vision, have been effectuating this vision, and will be able to help us, get it off the ground. And so that's when I say I'm a co-founder. It's because I went to Blacks of the Land and we co-founded this together. Like this was something that we said, as Black and brown people, this is essential. This is important for our children and for our families. And so this is something that we want to support. And so it just, again, speaks to how powerful it is, like you said, to have people in leadership, who look like us. And again, that's always been the big thing for me. I know there are phenomenal kind of, non-Black, non-BIPOC people in the world who are doing great things. But I also want my child to see someone that looks like them doing the things that she believes that she can do. And there's just no substitute for that. And so that's something. And I just want to again shout out Chris Jackson. He's in the chat from Detroit Outdoors. 20-year educator, phenomenal work. It is so important to have him with the Forest School, always there, like teaching the babies, clearing out all these paths so we can go to all these crazy places. But it's so important to have, the mamas and the babas on the trail with us so that our children can see that and see themselves doing that.
Right. Yeah. There was I was just looking in the chat there, and it does remind me of experience that I need to share in this, in terms of land management and conservation, all those things. And I wasn't exposed to those things at a young age. I'm a lot older than a lot of y'all, and probably a lot of people on the call. But what I want to say is that, I went to Kenya, and so when I went to Kenya is the first time I actually saw like land management workers as a positive thing. People in that green and tan suit I had never seen before that looked like me, but it was everybody. Okay. So it really changed my mindset in why we don't go into that arena, into land management, into conservation, into the environmental, and all those things. It's like, yes, because you don't see people like yourself in it. So that is one of the ways that, just like we push STEM, we need to push environmentalism, and, a lot of that comes with the very foundational skills that you can have to take care of yourself, right? Your father taking you out and teaching you how to use a compass or whatever it may be. But if you have the foundation, whether it be Harriet Tubman, who you learn it on your own and you just do it, right? So we need to look at how do we educate? How do we learn things? How do we build confidence in what we know and able to go out and do the things that we want to do? And then we can also look at the representation, right? And the barriers. Honestly, I don't have those barriers. And for me, I'm going to go out and do something. Now, yes, there's a lot of things that have come along with that. But in terms of me stepping through a door and saying, hey, I want to try this, I don't have them. I'm not saying that other people don't. I recognize that. And so that's, again, where things are changing. We have to recognize that people need something. Not everyone, but everybody needs something different in their way of engaging. And until they get to a certain level, and then they're just confident they can do it by themselves, take people out, go with different people, whatever. But we have to recognize this foundation that people need in order to find their place in the outdoors and in the environment and with nature. Yeah.
If I could just ask folks on the panel, I want to dig a little bit deeper into, Phil had mentioned the land management agencies and, the representation, both what he saw, right, when he went to Kenya, and then the lack of representation of people of color here in this country. So I was part of a National Park Service Academy like years ago. It was an intentional effort by the National Park Service to really look at how do we connect with, in a very thoughtful, intentional way, with youth of color about like connecting for pathways into careers in public land management agencies. Long way to go, right? So I'm just curious if any of you, in the midst of all the creation that you're doing as it is, right, building community, we're just doing this, not waiting for a federal agency, but while you're doing that, and then seeing the federal agencies doing as best they can, working on the representation piece, are there things that you have seen or things that you think they could do better to really sort of embrace and connect and support with communities of color that are working to really sort of like change the narrative and build these meaningful connections to nature.
Yeah, I've seen, over the honestly, when I first came into the industry, there was programs with the Student Conservation Association and their diversity programs, and that was back in the 90s. And it's funny how things, will blossom and then they just go away and they're never to be seen again. But what, like you just mentioning the program that you were in, the Junior Rangers program, the program that I'm thinking of, like how many other programs are out there that were and now are not, that could actually be rebuilt and revitalized in a way that is more meaningful and more sustainable, right? So, and that will take, that takes, like you just mentioned, national parks. So it takes national parks, it takes land management agencies, it takes outdoor programs and so on to find what are these things and how to collaborate, and not collaborate the way that they were in the past, but how they can push us in the future and building these communities that do have that are inclusive.
Something.
So yeah, 20 years down the line, we don't have this problem of land management agencies, being, very homogenous. Our national parks not having interpreters that are interpreting the way that it should be interpreted.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Something that, I think my approach to organizing, I and absolutely acknowledge that it is very important to expose and engage youth in this work. I think that my skill set is more around bringing together current and aspiring outdoor leaders who can then, to help them build the confidence and skill sets to then go out and bring their respective communities out as well. And there are so many folks that I think are people of color that I know and am in community with that want to be leaders in this space, as a hobby, as a job, and are trying to find pathways to do it in, and have their own really strong community connections. And so just kind of working within that model of, getting a few people to just be down to go camping with me and try it out, and then they feel comfortable doing it, and then they go and they bring their families or their community from church or from their neighborhood. It has that sort of ripple effect. I do, I've done in this line of work, I've done some consulting with outdoor and environmental organizations that are looking to diversify their programming. And, I think to that point, Garrett, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. But for me, something that I think is kind of just general across the board. Oftentimes I see organizations trying to retrofit their existing programming or approach to get more folks of color, more representation into them. But the problem is that if your existing programs or campaigns are predominantly made up of white people, white constituents, participants, whatever, and you're considering having diversity as a metric of success, then your existing things are not successful. So it's really important to work with folks of color who are doing this work in community and pay them to be able to speak into designing programs that actually fit their approach, are informed by the barriers and the opportunities unique to people of color, so that your organizations are effectively serving a broader community, a more inclusive community. And whether that's through hiring, through finding a consultant, if you have platforms or funding to support existing grassroots initiatives or organizations that are led by people of color already. Like a lot of folks of color have solutions, have ideas, have really great things that they can do or are doing, but they're just not being invested in enough. So rather than trying to kind of retrofit what you already have, really try to just amplify the solutions and approaches that are being created by folks of color in this space. I think that is a really impactful way to not only build to create more opportunities for folks of color to be in this space, whether as part of the workforce or recreationally, or just as, incorporating stewardship into their day-to-day practice. And also to invest in future, as I said, future workforce. But I think there's, it's also a great way to start to build trust with folks more authentically, rather than just kind of tap somebody to kind of check off that box for you. Really kind of get them into the infrastructure of the programming that you're putting out there.
Right on, Alice.
I'm so glad that we're talking about this because I've been watching the chat. I can't figure out how to respond to you guys in the chat, but I've been seeing what you guys have been saying, and so I want to say first, like it's really, I think it's beautiful and it's important. Like so many of the things that we've accomplished, BIPOC people in general have been, of course, with allies too, and I think that's really important. And so how do you like, and I think I see the same thing kind of over and over again. It's like, well, we've opened it up, but like they're not coming, or like, we've said we want to know more, but like we're not getting more. And so some of this, and again, some of it, builds off of what I was just saying. Some of it, like it's not anything that is against you or anything like that, but it's like, again, my child needs to see Black and brown people doing this. And so it's like, they might not get that where they're at, where you're at. And that there's something like wrong with that. Like, it's not, it's just, so I think what that exemplifies for me is that you all can support the organizations that we do build, right? Like, as opposed to, hey, come over here, come over here, come over here. And not to say that we don't want to come over there or that we won't come over there sometimes, but like, sometimes that's not what we need. Sometimes we need you to just support what we're already doing. And that can be, it can be access. Maybe there's a relationship that you have with some nature preserve, right? Or maybe there's some connection that you have somewhere so that we can take our kids there too, right? You might want us to come with your group, but maybe what the key is that you pave the way so that our group can come by ourselves, right? And so sometimes that's what it is. And so I think that what we want it to be is like, we're all going to do it together, but just sometimes that's just not the solution. It doesn't mean that it's wrong or right. It just is, right? It's just, again, I need my child just as much as I need my child seeing me working with all different kinds of people. I need her to see Black and brown people in positions of leadership, doing the whole thing, right? Like, not just doing the whole thing themselves, because that is possible and it is doable, and she needs to see that. So I want to say that I think on the kind of like the government level, the higher level, kind of like what are the things that like big government agencies can do? I think one of the biggest things there is access, right? So I put my Instagram name in the box. It's Medicine Moon Mama. I am a moon mama. Like, I want to go sit in the full moon and meditate. Okay, that's what I want to do. I can't do that in most state or federal parks because it closes after a certain time, right? And again, I'm not saying that you let everybody come in there for a midnight party. That's not what I'm saying either. But just, again, there's got to be an understanding that like nature does not operate on the frameworks that our society has built for it. Nature is always doing, and there are always people that might want to convene, or always people that might want to be somewhere, and that's okay. I get that there are some people that want to be there at night and damage things and all the, all the bad actors, right? There are always bad actors, but there's so many of the rest of us, again, that are a part of this movement where we just want to have the time and the space to engage with nature on our own terms. And so I think so often federal access to federal and state parks is so limited that people are not able to do that, especially people who are working a 9 to 5. Like, I mean, if it like, or even like, there's a graveyard where my ancestors are buried in Ohio, and it closes at sunset, right? It's 2 hours away. So if I'm trying to go after work, I can't really do that, right? Because it's sunset and it's closed, right? And so, so that interferes with my ability to be able to be there, right? And so I think, and I think that the last thing that I'll say, I know we're running low on time, but I think it's so important at the larger level and at the community level. Like, you got to listen, but you've got to implement. And this is kind of like what Alice was saying. Like so often it's like, oh, well, our structure doesn't like really accommodate that. And like, that's the end of the conversation. That can't be the end of the conversation. Like, that has to be, oh, thank you. Okay, hold on for just a second. That has to be like, that has to just be a part of it. Like, it has to be a framework to something new, right? Like, so now you're going to examine how that program needs to change. Not just like, oh, we would have to change our program, so we're not going to do that. And so that's hard. I've worked for the government. I know it's hard. It takes a lot of work. You got to convince a lot of people. It might take a lot of money. But like, if you are committed, then that's what you need to do, right? It's like, there are changes that need to happen. We live in a nation that is structurally racist. I could talk about that all day, right? But we all work in that system. And so we are the ones that have to figure out how to change that. And so if we're not changing existing frameworks, we're not going to get anything different. And so you got to listen, right? I think a lot of people are doing really good at the listening part, but like, you got to implement, even when that's hard. And especially if you're the government, because you have access to more resources and money. Okay, so so anyway, I'm gonna stop now. Okay.
And I like to say is it needs to be baked into the crust. It can't just be the topping. So just making sure it's really, really baked in there. It can't be kind of an afterthought.
I'll just say we feel pretty lucky, or I should say I feel lucky, and I think some of our partners feel lucky with one particular example with the United States Forest Service having a program in the eastern region of the Urban Connections program. And I don't know if it's necessarily baked in or what, but I experience it as this fibrous sort of thread that sort of runs throughout sort of like the region that we're in with the Great Lakes, of having like a program that is really trying to support and listen, even though it doesn't necessarily have access to all the command of dollars and infrastructure change. Like, I see it as a hopeful thing where you've got this program, these staff, these urban connections programs with the Forest Service that listen, try to support communities where they're at. I mean, they're a part of really supporting and lifting up, Black Land Service Forest School and a lot of our programs. And then just being that sort of interface, of like with the upper administrators and the federal government, and just trying to keep that connection alive, because sometimes the federal government, as regimes change and administrations change and administrators change, maybe what helps them when they come on board understand, well, where we pick this up is the fact that our communities have been able to like survive and stay intact and continue sort of building like what we're building. And so we can point the federal government in the right direction. It's a long one, but
no, that makes total sense, man. And I think the best example of that is, you're right. Like, those administrators change, but the people in the community stay the same. And this is one of the reasons why I think having the people in the community are the key to the sustainable program, because they want to be there. This is one of the sacrifices. Like, I don't live in that community. I had to sacrifice other things to get to this point, but not everybody's going to do that. There are a lot of people who that's where they are grounded. That's where the programs are. That's where they can make the most effective change. And the outdoors industry hasn't figured that out yet, that we need to go into the community and figure out how can we help the folks in the community connect in the ways that they can connect, and not pull them out to what we say is the industry itself, right? It's not about pulling dollars from those people to keep this thing running. It's about pulling us all together to make everything run.
Phil, there's a question earlier in the chat that this is a little bit of a change of the topic of the direction of our conversation, but we're at 6 minutes out. There's a question that said, "Hey Phil, how did you get into climbing?" And I'm wondering if we can use that question as a way to. I feel remiss in my role as a moderator if I didn't just ask you to give us a little taste of Full Circle Everest. Phil, you were a part of creating something amazing. And I know you can't, we're not going to be able to understand it in the way that you experienced it, but give us a taste of what that was like. And,
Well, I mean, how I really got on, somebody asked me, "Did you want to go climbing?" And I said, yeah. Like I said, opportunities unturned. I'm never gonna say, nah, because now I can't look back in life and say, what if I had took that opportunity to go climbing that one time? I wonder if I would have liked it or not, right? So honestly, that's how I got exposed to climbing. Someone asked me the question, do you want to go? That was years ago. In terms of working in the outdoors and becoming an outdoor professional, that's a whole nother story. That happened years later, but it was, again, it was due to a life-changing experience, and during that period of time, I had time to think, just like a lot of people did during 2020. And I said to myself, whatever in life that I want to do, I'm going to do it because life is short. And my uncle had taken me fishing years ago. I had access to open space. So I had a connection, a foundation to the outdoors, but that was that outdoors, not the outdoors that we're talking about, the climbing and this industry. So that's why I say that, you know, um, so once that happened and I was exposed to that, I was like, you know what, I'm going to take this course. And then I was trained, I got, you know, professional training on climbing, and I've worked in the industry ever since then. So that was really my entrance was taking a nose course, you know. Um, but there's a lot. I didn't do it just for recreation. I did it because I wanted to, but when I started working, it was a job, and I could do this for work. Not a lot of people get to do something they like to do for work.
Can you share a little bit of, like, now that you're on the other side of the Full Circle Everest expedition? I know Full Circle Everest is more than just the expedition, more than just that trip to the mountain, but
Yeah,
just share a little reflection of where that whole experience sits with you right now.
where it is right now.
It's just what it means to you right now. Yeah,
Yeah,
what you
geez.
want to share.
I mean, I mean, you're gonna ask me to be real vulnerable right now, but what it really means, man, if you look back 30 years when, I mean, I just wrote it on here, um, where I never had students. There weren't people who looked like me when I came into the industry. So to go from that to, and there's a lot of stuff in between there, believe me, but this was the last thing I've done. So think about when I came into the last thing I've accomplished was an all-black team to climb Everest. you know I'm proud of that for sure. But there's so much in between that. Not only that, but there are 11 of us team members. There's 11 different stories of black people who have gotten to that point to be a part of that team, and like, what are those stories, right? So yeah, I'm proud to be a part of it, but I'm also proud to sit here and be a part of this conversation and all of the other things that either I know of or I don't know of, but that are really getting black and brown people reconnected or opening their minds to the outdoors. And that's just gonna then connect and build more community that's more diverse, and that's what the environment needs, right? We need those solutions from all across everything. That's what we all need. We need solutions for humanity. We need solutions for the environmental, because we're all connected, right? So we can't continue to be separated as people and try to connect with nature and solve these problems that we have in the world if we're not taking care of each other. And to me, it's the outdoors, it's nature that helps us do that. Yeah.
Thank you for going there and being vulnerable and sharing that with us, Phil. We got a little bit of time left. I want to pass it to Alice and then Mama Erin, maybe to share some last thoughts. I just need 15 seconds at the very end.
I know, right? Oh, yes, you need 15. Okay, go ahead, Alice.
I was just, Phil, you mentioned you took a Knowles course, and I actually had the privilege of being in Knowles' first all BIPOC expeditions. It was a 9-day backpacking trip in New Mexico in the Gila National Forest. Definitely not Everest, but it was an incredible experience. Actually, Rosemary, who was, I think, with y'all on First Circle Everest, she was one of my instructors. And, there was a point in that trip where somebody said, I don't remember a time where I was only with people of color for this long a period of time. And just the way that we were able to build community in such a short period of time. We all went in coming from different parts of the country, not knowing, each other, anything about each other going into it. I'm an introvert, so I was more anxious about having to be with people nonstop for that long a period of time than I was about the trip itself. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences that I had had. And the way a friend of mine who was on that trip described it as this beautiful act of world building. And that really inspired me to want to continue to create spaces like that, that were accessible for folks, not, affordably, safely, as far as their experience goes, all of that. Because it really, it did a lot for me and my growth as a person, and just my desire to want to help curate and facilitate as best I can these connection spaces. So yeah. And thank you so much, Garrett, for having me on this call again and on this panel. It's just been a really great chatting and hearing from Erin and Phil. So honored to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Alice, for participating. And I know we're over right now, but I've gotten the word from the tech folks. We can go over a little bit. So
oh, cool.
Mama Erin, please.
I had one more thing to add, as if I need to say anything else. But I wanted to give a shout out to some of my colleagues at the University of Michigan. So I went to the University of Michigan for undergrad. They've been very intentional about reaching out to the Forest School, saying, hey, we want you to come. And in two instances, two separate departments, I think, the planetarium at the Natural History Museum, Natural History Museum at University of Michigan, and the Botanical Gardens. They are both intentionally taking on, whether it's through graduate student research or through other modalities, utilizing more cultural knowledge in their provision of natural-based academics, right? So, and we took the kids to the planetarium, and they were talking about how, we've always called this Orion, but we know that it's also called Sirius, right? Like, and so it was like, oh, wow. It was like, I'd never seen or heard anything like that. And I know that at the Botanical Gardens, they too there are really engaging in some work around ways of cultural knowing in gardens, right? So I just forgot the importance of, lifting up and, again, listening for those sources of cultural and ancestral knowledge when it comes to interaction with the earth and with the planet, and lifting those up, right? Again, integrating those into what you're doing, right? And in some instances, you might have to completely change what you're already doing, right? And do this instead. But I wanted to lift them up because I think that was the first time. Yeah, go blue. I see it in the chat. That was the first time I had seen anything like that. And again, and the children got to witness those instances where they were talking about this. And I just thought that was really, really powerful. So I too have really loved this conversation. So glad that we got to talk about some of these things that we're, all dealing with as Black and brown people in the outdoors. But, and also just the experience that the both of you, hold on, how am I doing this? You and you, right? No, you and you. I got it. Okay. Bring to this space. And so just honored to be in community with all of you. And so, of course, Garrett, I'm sure I'll see you before I see the two of you, but hopefully I will see you both also in the natural world sometime soon.
Phil, would you? Is there anything you'd like to say before I close us out?
No, it's just funny how the things align and so on, because I don't know, Alice. We just got on this call here, and just hearing you speak and hearing your story, I'm like, I should hook Alice up with Rosemary, because there's some connection there. And I already know that there's already a connection, right? But I also want to, and I was thinking about this, and I know you said we have a little bit of time, but I want to just give you an example of, we're going to go back, like, how are things changing and how difficult things may have. And it's not to, I don't like to poke, but it's like, what's the solutions? How are we moving forward, right? Alice, what year was that you went on that trip with Rosemary?
2019.
2019. Okay. I ran a trip. I was working for Knowles I started there in 1994. I recognized when I would go home, my mother was my biggest advocate, and she would invite people over the house and say, oh, this is my son. He does this stuff. And people were like, oh, I'd like to do this, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, 1999, I worked at Knowles. I ran a program specifically just what you just described, with some friends. One of them had been on a nose course. He was Mexican from LA. Another friend of mine who's from the Ojibwa tribe. Another friend who's Black from Oakland. I did that in 1999 because I recognized what people looked at. Now, this organization took them another 20 years to do the same thing. Yes, things are changing, but does it really take that long? I'm just saying. It's just a question. So again, it took what I've been doing, and I've been doing this piece by piece, person by person, little by little, but it took to go to Everest, to take an all Black team to Everest, to actually for people to see that and to recognize that. So again, yes, things have changed, and I'm trying to figure out where I fit even at this level, right? But to me, it's about building community, and it's about getting people into that space where they're comfortable. And I'm going to continue to say the same thing that I was saying 20 years ago. Yeah. Catch up with us. Catch up with me. We can make things happen, as you can see. And I don't say that it takes all of us. I'm just a piece of it, right? But we don't have to set some people aside and then reinvent the wheel and then say, look what we're doing. We've talked about that. It's like, where do you get the people in the community and say, how can we help you? Yeah. So it's changing. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Phil. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Mama Erin. And look at Saluna there. Hey, sweet baby girl. Good to see you. I'm going to invite our, in terms of like looking at ways to change. I don't know where it fits in terms of like, the pace or the rate, but, the Sierra Club, for the first time in its history, has an African-American who is the executive director running the organization. Ben Jealous. We're excited to have him, and he's starting on a listening tour, to go around the country and really connect with as many folks in the Sierra Club around the country as possible. And we'll invite him to listen to this conversation. I hope this can be a part of, sort of like how he comes into the work. And I know he brings so much of his own accomplishments and abilities to it. So I'm glad that we can, have this as a part of maybe part of his listening tour, and a way to change and continue to evolve at the Sierra Club. I want to thank everybody who's tuned in. If you're still listening, please know that you can see a recording of this if you follow on the Sierra Club's YouTube channel. And so if you feel like you want to share it with others, please do. I hope we were able to answer some of your questions just through the flow of the conversation. I know we didn't do like bullet point specific readout of your questions, but it was a wonderful flow that Alice and Mama Erin and Phil had. So I hope that it was worth your time to even if your question didn't get answered specifically. And just thanks to the Sierra Club communication staff behind the scenes, really sort of made this easy for the four of us. Alice, Mama Erin, Phil, I can't wait for us to find ourselves in conversation together again, and maybe even in this form. It's been wonderful. So thank you for your work.
Thank you for the connection. I appreciate it and the opportunity, man. It's been amazing. Yeah. Thanks again.
Okay. Y'all are some of my heroes. This is great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, y'all.
Ciao.